In the late 1980s, marketing executives popularized a term that would give millions of kids a new way to think about themselves. They called them tweenagers, and suddenly, being 9 or 10 meant something different than it had for your parents or grandparents. Before the 1980s, if you were between 9 and 12, you were simply a child. Maybe an older child, but still a child. You played with toys until you didn't. You wore whatever your parents bought you. You watched whatever was on TV when your homework was done. But something shifted in American culture during the Reagan era. The same decade that gave us MTV and personal computers also decided that growing up needed more categories, more products, more anxiety about getting it right. The tween wasn't discovered, it was manufactured. And here's what's fascinating, this wasn't just clever marketing, it was the moment when American parents became convinced that their 9-year-olds' needs were fundamentally different from what children had needed for thousands of years. We created an entirely new life stage and then forgot we'd made it up. What happened was this. Marketers realized they could sell more stuff if childhood had more boxes to put kids in. But to make those boxes stick, they had to convince everyone, parents, teachers, kids themselves, that these weren't just shopping categories, they were natural stages of human development. The word tween gained widespread recognition in the late 1980s, but to understand why marketers suddenly needed it, we have to look at what was happening to teenagers. The teenager is also a relatively recent invention. The term teenager, with a hyphen, popped up occasionally in the early 1900s, but didn't become a real cultural category until the 1940s. A 1944 Life magazine photo essay called "Teenage Girls, They Live in a Wonderful World of Their Own" marked the moment when American society started seeing adolescence as something you could sell to, not just something you endured. The photographer Nina Lean documented 12 girls aged 15 to 17 in Webster Groves, Missouri. These weren't just older children, they had allowances, social rituals, and most importantly, purchasing power. The article noted that babysitting let them augment their $2 to $3 weekly allowance, which must cover lunches, movies, sodas, records. Fast forward to the 1980s, that carefully constructed teenage identity was trickling down. 8-year-olds wanted their own music, 9-year-olds had opinions about fashion, 10-year-olds were demanding cultural independence from both parents and older siblings. Marketers faced a problem. How do you sell to someone who isn't quite a teenager but clearly isn't a traditional child? The solution was elegant: create an entirely new demographic category. Eugene Gilbert had proven in the 1940s that teenagers controlled real money and made their own purchasing decisions. By the 1980s, marketers realized this economic power was spreading to even younger kids. The term tweenager solved multiple problems at once. It acknowledged that 9 to 12-year-olds had different desires than younger children, while creating a distinct identity that wasn't competing with real teenagers. Most importantly, it justified an entirely separate product ecosystem: tween magazines, tween clothing lines, tween entertainment franchises. But the invention of the tweenager wasn't just about marketing convenience, it reflected something parents were genuinely worried about in the 1980s. Their kids seemed to be growing up faster than they had. Child psychologists were documenting what they called kids getting older younger, children adopting adult behaviors and concerns at increasingly younger ages. Dr. David Elkin's 1981 book, The Hurried Child, argued that American society was systematically rushing children through developmental stages. The tweenager concept was both a symptom of this acceleration and an attempt to manage it. Think about what was happening in the 1980s: rising divorce rates, more families where both parents worked, latchkey kids spending hours unsupervised after school. Children were gaining independence not because society decided they were ready for it, but because economic pressures made it necessary. The tween category provided a compromise. A 9-year-old could have her own fashion sense without being expected to navigate teenage social drama. It preserved some boundaries around childhood while acknowledging that those boundaries were already shifting. But here's the darker part that marketing executives rarely discuss. The creation of the tweenager demographic coincided with what we might call the commercialization of parental guilt. Companies weren't just selling products to tweens, they were selling solutions to parents' anxieties about their children growing up too fast. The genius of tween marketing was exploiting that guilt. Mothers who worked outside the home could buy the right tween products to show they understood their children's development. Fathers who felt disconnected could bond over shopping trips to tween-focused stores. This created what sociologist Juliet Shaw calls the commercialized childhood paradox. Parents worried about their children being exposed to inappropriate adult content while actively purchasing products designed to make those same children feel more sophisticated. Look at the language in tween marketing. A 1989 advertisement for a tween cosmetics line promised to help girls look pretty without looking grown up, a logical impossibility that perfectly captured the category's contradictions. Compare this to other countries. Most European nations recognize three broad stages: childhood, adolescence, adulthood. The idea of subdividing childhood into multiple consumer categories is largely American, exported globally through entertainment and marketing. In Japan, the concept of a distinct tween identity didn't emerge until the late 1990s, imported through American media franchises. The long-term consequences of inventing the tweenager have been more profound than anyone expected in the late 1980s. What began as a marketing category has become a genuine developmental stage, complete with its own research, educational policies, and social expectations. Middle schools were redesigned around tween psychology. The previous junior high model, which treated 7th through 9th graders as young teenagers, was abandoned for institutions specifically designed for the unique needs of the tween demographic. This created a self-reinforcing cycle. Once schools, parents, and media started treating 9 to 12-year-olds as a distinct group, those children began exhibiting the behaviors adults expected from tweens. The category became real through repetition. The digital age has complicated everything. Social media platforms have age restrictions that create new boundaries around tween identity, while simultaneously exposing children to adult content at unprecedented levels. The original tweenager concept assumed adults could control what kids saw. That assumption is laughably obsolete. Today's tweens navigate TikTok and Instagram alongside traditional tween media, creating hybrid identities that would have been impossible in the 1980s. They're simultaneously more sophisticated about global culture and more anxious about social acceptance than previous generations. The COVID-19 pandemic added another wrinkle. Remote learning and social distancing disrupted many institutions that traditionally defined tween experience: middle school hierarchies, after-school activities, mall culture. Some researchers argue the pandemic compressed the tween stage, pushing children more rapidly into teenage concerns. Perhaps most tellingly, the success of tween marketing has inspired even more granular categories. Marketers now recognize pre-tweens aged 6 to 8. Some companies experiment with post-tween categories for 13 and 14-year-olds who don't yet identify as full teenagers. This raises the obvious question: are we discovering natural stages that were always there, or creating artificial divisions that serve commercial rather than developmental purposes? The research suggests both. Children do experience genuine transitions around ages 9 to 12. Abstract thinking develops, social awareness increases, independence needs grow. But the specific ways these transitions get understood, labeled, and commercialized, those are entirely cultural constructions. Nearly 4 decades after marketing executives first popularized tweenager, we live in a world where the category feels as natural as puberty itself. Parents plan tween birthday parties, educators design tween curricula, children proudly claim tween identity as proof they're growing up. But every time we use the word tween, we're participating in one of the most successful acts of social engineering in recent memory. We've convinced ourselves that a marketing category represents basic human development when it actually represents something more interesting: our collective anxiety about children growing up too fast, combined with our inability to resist selling them products that promise to help them do exactly that. The tweenager wasn't discovered in psychology textbooks or research labs. It was invented in advertising agencies and focus groups, then exported to the rest of society as scientific fact. And maybe that's the most remarkable thing about it. Not that it was constructed, but that it works so completely we've forgotten it was ever constructed at all.